Hello and welcome. What do stories say? I'm Dr. Pauline Baird, a cultural bearer from the village of Buxton, Guyana. And as you know, I tell the stories of my village. I tell our family histories, our whispered stories, our hidden, practiced, and sometimes lost or long forgotten traditions. What does story say? Lautak story. Now, what is story said this week is a focus on Book It. And as you know, Book It is a live event on Zoom where I talk with friends and authors about their work. I believe that when we write, we should read what each other write. Let's consume what we produce. I say in Creolese, let me write them too. And if you write them, you go read them. And so I want to celebrate authors. This began when authors began sending me their books after I started What the Story Say. And it just developed like that. And I just feel like that's the direction I should go. This is very organic for me. And I do this for reciprocity to give back to my village. And I will keep doing it until it's no longer fun. And then I'll know my time here is done. So that's what I'm about. I met Kimani Nehusi a couple of years ago when I was in search of my dissertation topic, and he was very encouraging. And I consider him a friend and mentor. You see, this book I'm going to feature today is called A People's Political History of Guyana, 1838 to 1964, sorry. 1838 to 1964. He sent me the entire manuscript. So I read it before it was published. I read everything. So the thing about this book is that when he first mentioned the dates, the years, 1838 and 1964, I thought, aha, I know something about this. And you do too. Because you see, Emancipation Time, 1838 comes up because that's the year that it was written in history that the enslaved people in Guyana were emancipated, right? And so I grew up hearing that thing. And then I heard 1964, but in this context, my younger sister was born in 1964, and she had some little warish tendencies. So my mother used to say, you see, she's a little warish because she'd been born in the disturbance time. So in Guyana, there was a disturbance, and it was a very big story. I was a child, and so they used to be whispering this thing. And, you know, in the years growing up, they would say that about her. So those are my 2 years. But how do I go from 1838 to 1964? That's a challenge. And it might be for you too. I want you to read this book. But I don't think you have to read this book in one sitting. And don't use it as a door stopper. It's a tome, but it's a engaging read. And I read it to find out the things I wanted to know. I wanted to know what happened to the people between 1838 and 1964. I wanted to know so many things, and I read it. And here is what I wrote, and I still stand by these words today. I said, for Guyanese to explain us to ourselves, Kimani Nehusi invites readers to critically engage with the social history of Guyana 1838 to 1964 through his interpretive framework of mapping. I see this work as a mapping. It's easy for me to conceptualize the work as that. What sets this book apart from other books on Guyanese history is Nehusi's attending to the interconnecting themes of class, color, race, labor, gender, environment, personalities, nationhood, and colonization, and much more. Reading this book is like navigating a map with Nehusi. He allows the reader, at least me, to delve into the newspapers and organizations and the bound yard and the nigger yard and to listen and to learn and rethink the interconnecting stories of the people who built Guyana from bottom up. And I'm going to share something with you just now. So it's not so far-fetched. For me, this history comes alive. And history, people don't get your eyes glazed over. History is storytelling. Think about it that way. And story nice, right? Good. Yeah, he doesn't lose sight of the people. He never does. He links their lives as a multiracial group before they were even called that. A multiracial group, he linked them to the land and the people and the practices, which is up my street. To apprehend the ways in which difference plays out and continues to play out and plays the integral roles in shaping a fuller reading of history. That's what I said in essence. Indeed, this work is accessible to readers as Nehusi converses on the how to understand struggle, liberation, engagement against and within colonial and neo-colonial spaces, provoking a rethinking of dominant rhetorics and histories of emerging nations from the level of the working people across and alongside socio-political lines. That's a mouthful, but basically what I understand him doing is pulling all the pieces together. So when I was studying history back in Guyana, I wasn't getting a composite of many things. I got little snippets here, little snippets there, but this works as a resource, right? So I would like to talk a little bit more about that and read. So as you know, it's going to be 1st of August and the emancipation thing coming up. And we might be wondering, what significance does that play? How else can we understand this liberation story or this emancipation story? Whether you're African Guyanese, Indo Guyanese, or whatever walks of life you've come from. And even if you're not Guyanese, you're Caribbean, or you're just an interested party. Nehusi says by the year 1838, when this study begins, the rest of the country is a comparatively vast interland, in the south comprising the hilly sandy and clay region, intermediate and interior savannas, and a huge mountainous region. And this place was kept sparsely populated, primarily as a result of a policy of the European planters. Its riches and its possibilities were unclaimed and undeveloped, especially by those who needed them the most. And those people are the Guyanese, who remained poor and locked out of the political process, and that mostly governed their lives. The interland too would remain underdeveloped. And in he covered in this 126-year period in this study. Okay, this book has 30 chapters covering 126 years of Guyanese history. So we get the interland, but let's go to where the things are happening. The happening part of Guyana is the coastal area, probably still is, right? And I was born in that area, Buxton. So he said here that this place, this is how he puts it. He said, it was not merely those economic, social, and political contradictions which seemed to confound common sense on this low, narrow piece of ground Guyanese called the coastland. This was the youngest geographical region of the country. It was also a very dynamic place, a condition usual for coastal zones, which are affected by powerful pressures exerted by three major earth systems that converge here: land, ocean, and atmosphere. So, okay, I know about 1838, but Kimani is populating this thing for me. I'm looking at the land. He's telling me about the land, and the land is contested and bombarded by these forces of nature. That's our Guyana, okay? And then he takes us under the land to the tectonic shifts that's happening under the land. There's shifting of the land, and that has direct impact on the people who live on the land, or the people who would come to live on the land. Because what would happen, the ocean would deliver deposits of soil, and then with movement underneath, it will take away. So you have this push-pull that's going on, and that's the land, that's Guyana, that's contested. And so he says this land is forever contested territory, an in-between place, constantly fought over by the forces of nature, and as we'll soon see, the forces of humanity. So as shown with this movement of the land, it was rooted in the formation of how the land was, and it was unfolding alongside the humanity that inserted itself into the ecology. we have to know that the Amerindian people were always there. The native peoples of South America and Guyana were always there. And so we have this people living in a place like this. And then Kimani goes further than the movement. He begins to populate it for us to understand this Guyana, so we can explain it to ourselves. At least I can explain it to me. And it says here that this place has a compelling geography. It has a geography that's inclusive of a greedy set of people who came to the land to inhabit it and to dehumanize humans. And then he said, on this land you have insect parasites and tropical diseases, and towering over by salt water from an angry Atlantic in the front. And then you have the ever-present swamp and serene waters of the rivers and the creeks behind the crowded coastal plain. So now we're going into the hinterland. You see what he's doing with the land? He's populating before us, building so that we could see what's going on. And he said, long before decisive human intervention, this region was drowned between the land and the sea, constantly being claimed and reclaimed. Now, if you're Buxtonian, you know, or I think you should know, that Buxton Front by the Atlantic didn't start by the seawall. It was over in the ocean by Buxton Front. So my grandmother used to say Buxton was all the way there. And Guyana said, Baba Yusi said, that to go to Georgetown, we didn't use Old Road up the front by the Telfords and so on. The Old Road was in the Atlantic Ocean as it is now. There was a road out there. So that's the reclamation that's been happening. And people could talk more about that. Yes. So he talks about the antagonistic relationship of the land and the water and the environment. And then came what he calls the disturbance of nature's playground. So in the midst of all of this, enter the Europeans and, living among the indigenous people. There was no harmony there. There was no harmony there. And so he said this land was born from conflict and cooperation. For these are the dominant tendencies in relationships among nature's foremost contending forces in this place. But at no time was it ever that either conflict or cooperation was the only principle at work. And this is important because we have a tension, or sometimes more than tension, racial tension. And I ask myself as a Guyanese, how does that fit with our reality? How can we come to understand that reality? And when placed against this contested nature of what Guyana is and was, it fits. It fits. He says there, inclusion and collaboration among different and often competing elements in nature have been an important aspect of a formula repeated with variations and without uniform success in human affairs. And then he's going to go on to talk about Guyanese history. And he says, Guyanese are different. We come from all walks of life and racial backgrounds. But he says here, difference should not automatically become an occasion for discord. He asks a big question: would humanity ever discover this lesson and replicate the principle of inclusion of contending forces into its attempts to find solutions to differences, disagreements, and conflicts within its own ranks? The great question of Guyanese history, both natural and human, if that division must be had, has therefore always been about harmonization, out of difference and discord. The indigenous people understood the importance of living in harmony with nature and developed a mature relationship with the environment. Then European capitalists arrived and endangered both the environment and humanity with their anti-environmentalist habits and their inhuman project of colonization. The people of this country were thrown together from different histories, cultures, and identities into these harsh circumstances designed by geography and intensified by colonialist humanity. Under colonial rule, the politics of the dominant class took advantage of the initial shock, disorientation, and disorganization into which colonial rule had reduced the various oppressed groups in the society it had organized. And so he talked about this system. This system functioned mostly to accentuate difference, and that would guarantee discord, guarantee a preservation of disunity. See? That's what happened. The resulting weakness among the working people of the land rendered this major social force more susceptible to control and exploitation by the ruling colonial forces. They call that divide and conquer, divide and rule. So the security and progressive development of this majority could never be guaranteed by such a system. So if we're going to do divide and rule, it's not going to be guaranteed. But again, we're working in an environment that's turbulent as well. So he says here, the social history of colonization in Guyana has therefore posed the same question asked by nature from a millennia before. And I'm going to ask these questions. Will Guyanese people ever discover this fundamental truth about the very existence of both their land and themselves? Will they ever learn from nature and construct a political culture that's built upon principles of recognizing, respecting, and incorporating the genuine voices of their different constituencies in the search for solutions to their common problems? In an idiom of Martin Carter that was crafted from a deep and perceptive engagement with the people and the place, would they ever listen to the land and learn the very lesson first offered up by geography and later repeated and confirmed by the social history of this place? I like that idea of listening to the land. I know a lot of scholars who talk about listening to the land, and that's why I really love it, and I like to talk about this place called Buxton because it's my kind of land. I know about that place, and I don't mean to just play on Buxton. Buxton is a village, like many villages in the world, and whatever village you come from, I want you to look at what I'm saying and listen to what I'm saying about my land and my village and make stories for yourself. I can only begin with what I know and then, pull out from there. And the work is too big to talk about everybody's land. So here we go again. He asked another question. Will they ever listen and will they ever learn? Could these different identities ever come together to become a real nation without necessarily diminishing the distinctiveness of any of its parts? I think I want to end here with this. Kimani's book is, I call him Kimani, forgive me. His last name is Nehusi, but I'm used to calling him Kimani. So Dr. Nehusi has his book on Amazon. I am not sure. Yes, it's 22 US dollars, very affordable. You can keep it as a resource. You can thumb its pages, and I can tell you, you can find out stuff that what was in old newspapers. You can find out about the political figures. You can find out about women. There's so many things to learn in here. It's a book you can keep returning to. College students, this might be a very good book to know and to have, because if you leave Guyana, people ask you about Guyana. This book can be a very good resource where you can find out more about you and us so that you can share your story. And more than ever, we need to learn more about ourselves, especially at this time of year when we are conscious of our Africanness and what African contributions were and are to society. and how we understand ourselves. So let's join the conversation this evening at 4:30 New York and Canada time and 8:30 p.m. UK time, I think. And we'll be on. Dr. Nehusi will be on with friends, and we're going to talk more about this book. Bring your questions. We unpack some things in here. It promises not to be boring. It's going to be educative and informative. So join us and let's talk the things. Walk good.